Welcome everyone to another Football for Fun video. I am Depressed the Texans fan, and welcome to my series on the top 32 NFL quarterbacks, all the quarterbacks who I deem worthy to start in this league. And we will be closing out today with the top 10. Actually, it's going to be technically the top 12, even though I did already cover 11 and 12 last video. I do want to make one amendment that I sort of decided after I recorded the video. I do pride myself as someone who will change their mind. Like, an opinion I had, yesterday might totally change today. I'm not these types of media people to where they're just gonna have their opinions, their strong opinions, and just stick with it. So, what I realized, and maybe you realized, although I didn't change it because of a comment or something, if you had wanted to criticize, you're more than welcome to, but what I realized is that Russell Wilson was not mentioned on the last video, and Russell Wilson was not mentioned at all in this series so far, which means that either I had Russell Wilson as top 10, or I just had him outside the top 32, which honestly, the way he played last year, he probably didn't play like a starter, but I think almost everyone can agree that Russell Wilson probably is a starter. He just had a bad year, and so with that said, I originally had Russell Wilson in the top 10, and honestly, that made me feel sick. Now, I do believe that Russell Wilson is still a good starter in this league. As I mentioned before, I'm not taking he had one bad year, we're going to just move him off the charts completely. I'm not doing that sort of thing. I do still believe that Russell Wilson's a top 10 type of quarterback, and especially with Sean Payton, which also, by the way, I'm trying not to consider the system they're in, because if that were the case, I would probably have Sam Darnold in the Shanahan system in the top 32. And in my list, he's not in the top 32. He wasn't on the video at all. So I'm just trying the best I can to consider the player themselves. So all that to say, I have made a slight change, and if you give me 1 second, so I have Russell Wilson at 12. Originally, it was, I think it was Dak at 12, and then Deshaun at 11, and then Russell Wilson at 10. So talking about Russell Wilson at 12, I guess I didn't really get to talk about him, but 11 and 10 I have talked about, so I'll talk a little bit about Russell Wilson. Honestly, it's not really, I think it's clear to everyone that Hackett was the problem in Denver, and with Sean Payton in a new system, he should be able to revive his career, hopefully. It'll be huge to see, because Sean Payton did revive Drew Brees' career, so it'll be interesting to see if he can do the same with Russell Wilson. I believe the last 3 games or so that Nathaniel Hackett wasn't on the Broncos, Russell did put up better statistics. So, I didn't fact check it, but I'm pretty sure he had a good game against the Chiefs, and he seemed to be doing better outside of Hackett's watch. But yeah, we all know Russell Wilson of old. He was always a magician, sort of a Houdini. He would try to do everything he could to win games for the Seahawks, and a lot of people thought that Pete Carroll was the problem, and honestly, when it comes to a divorce like that, I think it goes both ways. Maybe Russell Wilson wasn't good enough, was too stubborn in the way he played. Well, actually, now that I think more Pete Carroll's the person who we think is more stubborn, but maybe just didn't work out. They had one Super Bowl victory, which honestly, just winning a Super Bowl, it should solidify him in the Hall of Fame. Well, not that Super Bowl. He had to post statistics after that, but there's also the question of if he plays badly, can he play his way out of the Hall of Fame? I've had that thought, This isn't some podcast episode where we're going to discuss it, but I do think it's some food for thought. So yeah, that's really all I have as far as the style of play goes, or just as far as his playing goes. Moving on to number 11, as we've talked about earlier, Deshaun Watson. I'm just doing this to sort of complete the list. I had a rant about him, so you can go watch the previous video. Dak is number 10. Okay, so we're now in the top 10. I talked about Dak last week. Sorry, not last week, just last video, and if you missed that, basically, he did lead the league in interceptions. I did also point out that his receiving room was very depleted, and I do think he's a very good quarterback. Not top 5 or anything like the Mahomes and Allens and things like that other people were going to see. I do believe he has some limitations, but he's a top 10 quarterback. And that does not make me sick. Russell Wilson, I was like, maybe we should revise it just a little bit. So, moving on to number 9, we have Matthew Stafford. Now, this is also pretty difficult. Maybe I could flip-flop Dak and Stafford, but Stafford's Super Bowl champion. It's mainly difficult because he had a bad injury last year, and I do take injury into account. Like, if you're really good but can only play half the games, then I'm going to dock you points for that. Because if you're not there, then you're not helping your team. Stafford did have a very good season in 2021 when he won the Super Bowl. However, also that year, like Dak, he led the league in interceptions with, I believe, 17. Although I believe he had over 40 passing touchdowns. So I think that, combined with his time in Detroit, we all sort of knew that Detroit was sort of the problem. He was very good. He was just on some bad teams with some bad ownership and just couldn't really do much as far as long-term success goes. It'll be interesting to see. I think a lot of people sort of forget about Stafford, and honestly, if he's going to be on the Rams this year, it's not looking great for him, and stock is probably just going to continue to fall. Thankfully, he has that Super Bowl ring. He's also an interesting subject as far as, is he a Hall of Famer, which it's kind of like he has a Super Bowl win, but you can blame the Lions for it, but he does have a career losing record, and his stats, I don't know how good his stats are as far as like just off the top of my head. I'm sure he's accumulated a lot of like passing yards and touchdowns, so he's probably up there as far as that goes, but I feel like, Stafford, when he's on, he could be like top 5, but also when he's playing terribly, he could be like in the top 20 or below that or something like that. So it'll be interesting to see, especially if he's going to start and be healthy on a depleted Rams team. Moving on to number 8, I have Lamar Jackson. Similar to Stafford, which is that Jackson just the past 2 years has had an injury problem. And again, if he's not going to be able to make it to like late regular season games, postseason games, he sat out the postseason, I'm going to dock points for that. I really like Lamar. I believe that his throwing ability, so just throwing, not like running or like moving within the pocket necessarily, I think he's above average as far as a thrower goes. Not anything amazing. Like, if you completely took away his ability to run, yes, he would drop off, but not by like a whole lot. He's probably someone I would compare just as a thrower, like a Jared Goff maybe. Although it's kind of weird. You never think about what would Lamar be if he didn't have his throwing ability. Let me know in the comments. Maybe a Mac Jones or something like that. I don't even know, because by far his defining attribute is his running game. He's one of the best just overall players in the league, if not all time, when there's an open field and he can just juke people and things like that. And I do take running into consideration. If you're like okay at throwing, but you can really run the ball, I'm going to give you points for that. And I guess as far as that is pertained, I guess Justin Fields does also fit in that category. But the difference with him, as I mentioned a couple videos ago, Justin Fields, yes, he's been a prolific runner, but that didn't win any games. Whereas Lamar Jackson, he literally won an MVP in 2019, an NFL MVP, when he was, just tearing it up on the Ravens. He joins, Mahomes, who else? Matt Ryan, Tom Brady. I guess Matt Ryan's not the most impressive like now, but back then he was really good. Aaron Rodgers obviously won a lot, Peyton Manning, so he's an MVP, and yes, you could say I'm living in the past. 2019 was not that long ago in the grand scheme of things. It's starting to get there. I also don't believe that the Ravens would have paid him if they didn't believe he was this good. So I do think if he was completely healthy and maybe had developed his passing game, he could be like top 5. Heck, after that 2019 season, wouldn't he have been considered like top 5 or something like that? I know that was before Joe Burrow and before Josh Allen really came along, but some food for thought. All right, moving on to number 7, we have Trevor Lawrence. So Trevor Lawrence, again, I really like. I would like to see more from him. He's one of those guys to where, yeah, he had a good year. He helped turn around the Jags, although his first year, well, again, I guess it was Urban Meyer, so we're not really counting that. A lot of people just don't count that season. Yeah, I think he's just a good leader. He has a really good arm. Honestly, I don't know his traits off the top of my head. He sort of just reminds me of Joe Burrow. Obviously, Joe Burrow is better, as we'll see later in the list, I believe, but there's not some defining characteristic to where he's top 2 at. He's just sort of good at everything. He can run, He did have that comeback against the Chargers, which I guess you do have to say he did throw 4 picks in the first half, but I mean, every quarterback has bad games. It would be interesting to see what his outlook would have been if that had just been the game. He threw 4 picks and then that's it. Would people think the same of him? Would people have fallen him or put him down in the rankings? It would be interesting to see. I do think that Trevor Lawrence, I mean, if he develops truly to my core, I think he's top 3. Although he only has 1 playoff win to show for it. I believe on the Jags, yeah, they went 9-8, so it's not like they got a first round bye or anything like that. So I think 7, given that he basically did finish his rookie season, 7's a good spot for him. Moving on to number 6, we have Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is an interesting placement because it's sort of the opposite of Trevor Lawrence. Deep down, I think he's kind of washed, and he may not even be top 10 or 15 or something like that. However, I do give him the benefit of the doubt. He did win 2 MVPs not long ago. I do have some cause for concern, or I guess he has some cause for concern, which is that when Davante Adams left, the 1 year he played without Adams, obviously since the MVPs, he has regressed. He just didn't play that well in Green Bay last year. Now, again, he didn't have very many weapons. I believe his top 2 receivers were rookies, so that's not going to help. I think there's just a lot of unknown, and that's what makes the NFL exciting. There's just a lot of unknown, and then once the season unfolds, we're going to know a lot. A lot of people are saying that this is the next Denver Broncos. I think my co-host said that. Actually, could this be the next Denver Broncos? Well, let's think about it. Next Denver Broncos seems to imply the 2022 Broncos when Russell Wilson came in. What if it's the gosh, I want to get the year wrong. 2012 Broncos when they brought in Peyton Manning. Could it be that sort of team? And I believe that year Manning threw 55 touchdowns or something like that. So I would say veteran quarterbacks going to different teams has been very hit or miss. You have the Russell Wilsons who didn't do that well, but then you have the Bradys and the Peyton Mannings and Matthew Staffords who went to those teams, and then eventually won a Super Bowl. And then you have the Matt Ryans who didn't succeed, and then it's just been very hit or miss. If I had to guess, I think it will be a success, although in the AFC it's going to be very difficult to... Well, I think they can definitely make the playoffs, but win the division and go far into the playoffs, it's going to be very difficult. All right, moving on to number 5, we have Justin Herbert. Now, Justin Herbert, very physically gifted. He did have a down year last season compared to his previous seasons, so I think maybe there are some people who think maybe that 5 would be a bit high for him, although he has freakishly good skills, and I think it's fair to assume that maybe he's being held back by his head coach Brandon Staley, who everyone hates and thinks should just get fired. In fact, I was shocked that he wasn't fired after the Jags playoff game, and the Chargers didn't go after Sean Payton. I've been starting to imagine, what if Sean Payton was coaching Justin Herbert, or another quarterback who we may or may not mention later, I do think Russell Wilson could be interesting, but that's a different topic. Sometimes with these players, again, I'm not watching film to just get some deep dive breakdown and just break everything down. Well, I said that twice, but we'll move on. But the thing with some of these quarterbacks, and namely Justin Herbert, obviously I know he's good. If I thought that he was bad, then I would have moved him lower, but I saw a game, I believe it was week 2 versus the Kansas City Chiefs on primetime. They ended up losing the game, so I think that was sort of an under-talked-about storyline. And it's actually funny because I saw the Netflix documentary and it talked about how tough Mahomes was and how he played through like an injury. He had like a rolled ankle and he insisted on being back in the game, even cussed the coaches out to do that. And then he like cussed when like they took him into the x-ray and they had to play Chad Henne. Justin Herbert played through pain in that game. Just Google or YouTube search whatever, like Justin Herbert touchdown drive hurt or something like that, and you'll see like the first pass he's like holding on to his rib or something and then just makes a bad throw, just basically throws it away but not, but then he just starts throwing dimes. And I don't know, I see that and I think that injury lingered throughout the season, and I'm just like, that's a tough SOB. Like, yes, Mahomes is also tough as well, but I saw Justin Herbert do that, and I was amazed. So, we'll see what he can do. We'll see. I do also believe that the addition of Kellen Moore will be very good for him, and we'll see if the Chargers can finally make the playoffs, win some playoff games, or if Brandon Staley is going to be gone, which honestly, it would probably just be better for them if Brandon Staley was gone. I don't hate him as a head coach, but they clearly need an upgrade. All right, moving on to number 4, we have Jalen Hurts. Now, Jalen Hurts, okay, there's some people, like for example, I said Trevor Lawrence, I'd like to see more from him. Jalen Hurts, in theory, is the same type of story. He's only had one good season on a stacked roster, but I saw enough to where for now, I do believe he's a top 4 quarterback. Again, he is a prolific runner. I guess I did forget about him when I was talking about like Lamar and Justin Fields. So he's a very prolific runner, contributed a lot to the running game. Like, I believe he had 7 rushing touchdowns with like 700 or 800 yards. So that definitely comes into play. And yeah, he just has a lot of good physical abilities. He's a great leader, you know, just like he kind of has that Joe Burrow quality, I think, to where just the guys just like really rally around him. And yeah, I saw him in the Super Bowl. And now a lot of people were saying that like his Super Bowl effort was like one of the best performances in Super Bowl history. I think that's some recency bias probably. I'm sure you can come up with several other efforts. I don't know if I heard like losing effort, just effort in general, but I'm sure there have been a lot greater Super Bowl performances. In fact, maybe Nick Foles' Super Bowl, I don't have the statistics. Jalen's was probably better, but he's really good. He's good with the quarterback sneak, which I know it's a quarterback sneak, and I think the NFL is going to try to do something to change that, but I don't know, he's really good. It's kind of funny, because once I get to these guys who are like really good, it's hard to dissect them, just because they're so good and we all know it. I think there are a lot of people who would think that this is high for Jalen Hurts, but I saw him in the Super Bowl. I think the one season so far is good enough for me to validate putting him at number 4. So, moving on to number 3, we have Josh Allen. Now, Josh Allen is another quarterback that a lot of people seem to think, oh, he's overrated, he can't win playoff games, yada, 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 which, I don't know. Again, I do believe that being able to run the ball and be physical is a component, which Josh Allen is clearly good at. He's also a really good passer. Like, he has a cannon of an arm. I don't really think it should go without saying. Now, what a lot of people will say, and I've actually wanted to bring this up anyway, is like, oh, his passer rating was not that good, which I believe his passer rating was like 92, which is not great, but, and I will admit, I do refer to passer rating sometimes. Sometimes if I'm just lazy and I just want to be like, oh, how did that player perform in this year? I'll just look at their passer rating. Oh, it was 89? That's not good. So I do admit that I refer to that sometimes. However, let me read to you the list of players ranked by their passer rating last year. Number 1, Tua Tagovailoa, who a lot of people are unsure about. Patrick Mahomes, Jimmy Garoppolo. No one considers him any good. Jalen Hurts, Geno Smith, Joe Burrow, Jared Goff, Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence. At number 10, the 32nd ranked starting quarterback according to my list, Andy Dalton. Number 11, Ryan Tannehill. So it's Dalton, Tannehill, then number 12 is Justin Herbert. And then Kirk Cousins. Daniel Jones, Aaron Rodgers at 15. Brady at 18. So really, if you look at it, as far as the top 5 go, I would say that 3 out of the top 5, being Tua, Jimmy, and Geno, we have questions about. And even if you want to be extra critical and throw in Jalen Hurts, I would also say that. And then you just have like Andy Dalton and Ryan Tannehill above Justin Herbert. So quarterback rating, it says something, but it's not everything. So, I mean, yeah, Josh Allen is really freaking good. Again, with Josh Allen, like, I believe that, like, Sean McDermott's a really good coach, but what if they just fired him and gone after Sean Payton? That's what I was referring to earlier when I was talking about Justin Herbert. Like, if Sean Payton had coached Josh Allen, or if Sean Payton would coach Josh Allen, I think the NFL would be over. Like, I actually think it. Like, you're not supposed to bet against the Kansas City Chiefs. And I don't know, maybe the Chiefs would still be the favorite, but I mean, I don't know. I dream about this. Sean Payton coaching Josh Allen. Like, all right, moving on to number 2, we have Joe Burrow. You know, I think we all just know he's really good. He has a good arm. He has that moxie, I guess. He can, like, move. He's just kind of good at everything. Sort of like Trevor Lawrence. Not really much. Maybe you can argue that, like, he has, like, some stacked receiving room. Like, he has Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd to throw to. He has Joe Mixon. You could argue stuff like that. But quite simply, I just look at it this way. The Bengals were bad. Okay, they were not, like, horrible as an organization. They weren't as bad as, like, the Texans are and, like, the Lions have been and the Browns. They had some success under Andy Dalton and Marvin Lewis. But those last couple of years, they were really bad. They were, like, directionless. And then Joe Burrow comes in, and then suddenly they're, like, AFC Championship every year, Super Bowl contenders immediately. Like, if I told you 4 years ago the Bengals would be perennial Super Bowl contenders, and they would basically own Mahomes, or own the best team in the league until, you know, this most recent AFC Championship, like, you'd call me crazy. So, at number 1, speaking of which, Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, I am not going to put Patrick Mahomes outside of number 1 for a while, probably. It would take a bad year and someone really just taking that step up and being the best. Like, I don't know. He's had it depleted since Tyreek Hill left, which I guess that's only 1 year, so it will remain to be seen, like, how that plays out throughout the course of his career. But if you look at it, he had a depleted receiving room last year. Like, Juju Smith-Schuster, MVS. He had Kadarius Toney for like half the season. Maybe I'm forgetting. Oh, he has Travis Kelce, obviously. But I would say that the receiving room alone, if you just rank it like in the NFL, it's not that impressive. And yet Mahomes is like consistently the best quarterback, you know, even without Tyreek Hill. So this season, I'd say it's even more depleted because Juju is gone. So you have Kadarius Toney. Oh, yeah, I guess Mecole Hardman. Is Mecole Hardman? No, he's on the Jets, I think. Or am I misremembering? But, yeah, I think McColl's gone. Or is McColl still on the Chiefs? I don't know. I'm not going to look it up. But you have Kadarius Toney. Yeah, I think McColl's gone, because if McColl weren't gone, then he'd be for sure the number 1. And now people are talking about Toney as the number 1. So, yeah, you have Toney, you have MVS, you obviously have Travis Kelce. I think Sky Moore is kind of coming on his own, apparently. I think there's also this Justin Watson kid that people like. So this will probably be, in theory, the most... I mean, Travis Kelce is getting older. He seems to be in his prime, but he's going to be a year older. So this will probably be the most depleted receiving room that Mahomes has had yet. On paper, the most depleted receiving room. And I'm going to pick him to win the Super Bowl. Like, I'm sorry. As I've said before, it's death, taxes, and Chiefs winning the AFC West. So I'm never going to pick the Chiefs to not win the AFC West until, you know, when they don't win it, I will then believe it. But I'm going to pick the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. I'm going to just feel weird not picking them. And if they don't win it, that's fine. Occasionally they'll lose like an AFC championship or like lose the Super Bowl, something like that. Yeah, they have yet to lose the divisional round, which is crazy. All right, well, that wraps up the top 32 NFL quarterbacks. I think I'll make a community post just recapping, you know, just the list, just so that you can see. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching this video, watching it all the way through. I will see you for the next video. Bye.